Hello, welcome to the first ever edition of Cooking with Steve. Today I'm going to make for you keto crackers, and these are going to be made of parmesan cheese. I've acquired mine from Aldi. The reason I like it is because it's already shredded, it's very economical to buy, and you can reuse the bags to store your crackers in when you've finished cooking them. The ingredients are just the cheese and then some seasoning. And the first instance I'll be making some plain ones, but along the way I'm going to use a little bit of garlic powder or granulated garlic, onion powder, ground cumin, white pepper. There's a Persian seasoning here which I like. My daughter gave me for Christmas, or one of my daughters gave me for Christmas, and I'll be making good use of that in a version of these crackers, as well as some curry versions as well along the way. So I just empty the contents of the bag into the bowl. I've got some instruments here later which you'll see the use of, but effectively the main thing in the first instance is to have a good baking tray. I'll use a silicone mat, and then of course a cookie cutter, and then in the top we just pour in a spoonful of the ingredients, which in this instance is just the plain Parmesan cheese. If you're making these, I recommend you make the plain ones. They're as popular as anything. And great for certain accompanying certain foods, and you'll see later you can have them with cheese. You can have them with all sorts of delights along the way. But a plain one is good mix. Is good in the mix to have. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm making these little piles of Parmesan cheese, and I'm making sure that as I do them inside the cookie cutter, that they're touching each other. And the reason I'm doing that, each individual one is sort of blending with its neighbour, is because in a little while, when I've placed them in the oven and I've cooked them to a certain point, what I'll need to do is flip them over to make sure they cook crisply on the other side. Now, to do that, you're better off placing these little crackers quite close to each other, because what will happen is as they go into the oven and they start to melt, they'll blend with each other, but they'll still form a seam between each cracker. They're joined enough to hold together while you while you flip them over. Hopefully I'm successful at that later. And as you flip them over, all in one sheet, what you've saved yourself is flipping over maybe 100 little crackers. So I'll keep doing this for a little while. I'll turn off the video in a moment. We'll come back, we'll stick these in the oven, and then I'll show you while we've got those underway, how we make the second batch, which will be a flavoured batch. Probably with garlic powder and onion powder, and that will prove to be quite a tasty mix as well. So when they go in the oven, in a few minutes, I'll join you. Thanks. Alright, we're underway with the oven. I'll just show you, we've got it on 140 degrees, so that's hot enough to melt the cheese, but not so hot that it will burn it. If you go much higher than that, you'll find that the outer ones will go a bit browner, and you'll just get this uneven cooked look to it. So 140 degrees Celsius, and it takes as long as it takes, so we do it by eye when we get to it, and you'll see what to look for as we get closer to finishing that first batch. So I won't put it in yet. I'll wait till the temperature gets up, and I'll show you how to mix the second batch. So in this flavoured version, what we're going to try is a little bit of garlic, granulated garlic. This one's from Costco. That's why it's so large. Just give it a bit of a shake in there. I always do it by sight. And then of course onion powder, again Costco. And I always like a little tiny little bit of bite with mine. You might choose to leave it out, but a little bit of white pepper is not a mistake in my view. Just not much, because you will taste it. Now all you do then is, having washed your hands, is give it a bit of a mix through to just combine the powders thoroughly into the cheese mix. Now you don't need a massive amount, but you might find that you like a little bit more than what I put in. You don't have to go over the top with it to get the flavour out of it. but the amount will be down to you. It's a two taste sort of thing. So let's start pouring those out, just as we did the last lot. And in due course, we'll stick this one in the oven as well. Okay, we're ready to go with the first tray. I'll just take you over to the oven, and in a moment or two we'll stick it in. You'll see that in the oven I've got trays up near the top. I'm going to stick this one on the top rack, and we'll just see how that goes for the next 15 or so minutes before we flip it over. Okay, now we've prepared the second batch. We'll make our way to the oven. I'll give you a look at how things are going in there, because you'll see that the cheese is melted and all those little piles have just blended with each other, but they are actually still separate in as much as we'll be able to break them apart later. So we'll stick our next batch in and get about making the following ones, because while we've got this inside the oven, we've got some other trays. We'll fill those up, and when one comes out, we'll get on with the next one. We've got a little bit of the last batch left over. I'll just put that on the beginning of the next tray. In this particular one, we're going to use, again, granulated garlic. And then the onion powder again, but this time, instead of the white pepper, we'll go with ground cumin. And this one, again, the big container is from Costco. Sometimes ground cumin is a little bit hard to get out. You don't need as much of that as you would have with the onion powder and the garlic powder. And again, just mix it through, and you'll really appreciate there's a difference between the onion, garlic and white pepper, and the onion, garlic and ground cumin, and the way that the flavours work together. So we'll make up the rest of this tray. We've already got a little bit of the last batch there. Put them out on here, no doubt spill into the tray after that. And in a moment or two, we'll get the ones that are half cooked out, flip them over, and you'll see how that's done. And then we'll put them back in the other oven to crisp them up finally. Okay, let's have a look in the oven, and we'll see if we can't get out this particular batch and flip them over. The first batch we put in. Now you'll see in there that they're not bubbling anymore. It's calmed down quite a bit. It's pretty solid, and that's the state you want it in when you go to flip it over. We've not put anything else in yet because we've got to get these back in the oven. What I've found over time is that if you cook these and you only do them on one side, what occurs is you get uneven cooking, and they're pretty hot. But you can see how you can lift them up all in one big sheet. This is wonderful. It's just coming together beautifully for me. I love this. This is a super wide pair of tongs here that enables me to do this. So that's how they should be. Flip it over, and you can see the lighter shaded pieces, particularly as you get towards the middle. The outer's a little bit brown, and what that is that the outside's cooked a little bit better than the middle. And what we want to do is put these back in just for a few minutes to get rid of the last of those white bits, and then what we'll do is we'll pull it out, pull it on the cooling rack, let it cool slightly, and then we'll start to break it up into individual pieces. So I'll put this back in the oven. Now I'm just putting together the curry powder version, and the reason I want to show you this is that you don't need very much, and you could easily be putting on too much curry powder. What happens is that as it bakes and the cheese melts, the curry is activated, and the colour changes quite dramatically to a golden brown sort of colour. And if you put a little bit too much on, it's just a little bit too strong. So I find that if you can just barely see it when you've mixed it into the mix, that's generally enough. And I think we've got it about right. I might add just a little bit to it, yeah, just a tiny little bit, and that should see it right to be a beautiful colour and a beautiful flavour at the same time. I've just pulled out the second tray here, The first tray is still cooking in there and still finishing. This one again has worked out really nicely. You can see when you look at the bottom here how some of the seasoning has come through to the bottom of each of the little crackers. So, and again, the centre is a little bit whiter than the outside, so that indicates that it's still got some time to go, and you'll definitely want to put it back in the oven to crisp up. So we'll do that now, and we'll see how those come out in a little while. Okay, we're going like a machine here. We're ready to take out this first batch, and we'll replace them with the third batch. So they'll go on the top of the oven, and in a moment or two, I'll pull this one out. You see all the whites disappeared out of the middle of that. Just put that in, get that underway, and then what you'll see here, so I'll be able to pull that entire sheet off in one hit. Now that's still pretty hot, and we're going to let that cool down for a little while before we start to break it up into individual crackers, because you can still see that there's a seam for each of these. We just need to let it cool a little bit so we can handle it. And if you break them up while it's still warm, what you'll find is that the breaks will be cleaner. You'll get less wastage of crumbs falling off it. So just try and do it just before it gets too cool to do that, and then you'll see how it breaks up into individual biscuits then. In the meantime, it's time for us to set about loading this one up with the curry. Okay, these guys have cooled down nicely. I can flip them over. You can see they're just one big sheet, and look how beautifully they come apart. And that's because they've just got a little seam. And when we made those little piles earlier, you can see that they've formed little seams between each one, and you can break them off in sheets. It doesn't matter if one or two get broken up. That's an excuse to eat one. And then just keep doing that while they're still semi-warm. Is the best way to do it, I found, simply because they leave less crumbs. When they fully cool down, they snap into and fracture as they snap. So it's better to have them so that they're sort of semi-warm. These are actually a little bit cooler than I would have. That is perfect, but they're still working just fine. And when it comes down to it, you reach in to get that packet. If it's not enough, you grab another one, don't you? So there it is. I think I've shown you well enough here. I'll get on with cooking the rest, see how they turn out, and be back with you shortly. Once they're cooled sufficiently, just put them into the bag they came out of, and put them in the fridge, because what's going to happen is that they'll get even crispier. And you can see, I take one over near the camera here, and you just see how they've got little pockets of air, beautiful and crisp, taste wonderful, fabulous with cheese or dips or a little bit of sausage or whatever you want to put on them, a pickle, just fantastic. So if you don't want to get rid of your carbs in your life, and you're not got an intolerance of fat, because fat's good for you, then this is the thing to go for. These are wonderful. This is the batch with garlic powder, onion powder, and of course white pepper. And you can see here how they just so beautifully break apart once they've cooled sufficiently into individual crackers, and just leave them a little while longer on the cooling rack before you stick them back in the bag and store them. So this is the way to go. A little bit of flavour. You can see on the bottom there, they've browned up, but they haven't burnt, and at 140 degrees they don't, whereas much above that, they certainly will. And you get a little bit of a carbon taste. So, and you might even choose to do it cooler again, just takes a little bit longer to cook. But this is I think, preserving and highlighting the flavours that you put into it, and got the right balance of time and effort that's taken to cook them. And if you make these, I can guarantee you will enjoy them. The ones that will come out a little bit later, the cumin ones, I probably won't film them because they're very similar, and I think you get the message. But yeah, not too much flavouring, and there's plenty there to taste. So you can see how the colours come through so beautifully. Garlic, onion, and white pepper. So I'm just about to put the last batch together, and I just thought I'd show you this. This is a jar of seasoning that my daughter's bought me for Christmas. A Persian sort of seasoning. You can see the ingredients there. You don't usually wouldn't want a lot of salt because they're salty enough. And similar to the curry powder, you really don't need a bucket load of this seasoning in the mix. It's going to, in a similar way, colour up the little crackers. Probably do a little bit more. Whoop, too much. And that should do it. So we'll make up this last batch, and then we'll get into seeing how they all came out, and particularly the curry ones. You'll see how they change in colour. That's them there now. You can see that's the last of a tray. I've got a full tray over here, ready to go in when the next one comes out. And you can see they're not all that colourful, but I can assure you when we finish, they will go completely change, because those herbs or the spices at least will all be activated in the oven, and you'll see the colour get right through it. So we'll come back to that in a minute. So here's the curry mix. I thought you might like to see how the colour difference works. There's the plain ones that we cooked in the first batch, and you can see how much the curried versions have changed from when we just added that little bit of powder. So there it is, the curry powder ones. Okay, we're finished. Let me show you the product. I've got 5 packets here. The first of which is the plain. You can see nice and clean. This one here, garlic, onion, and white pepper. And then garlic, onion, and cumin, just a little bit browner. And then, of course, the curry and the Persian seasoning. So I've got enough keto crackers there to last me a couple of weeks and to share them with others. I recommend them to you. They're fantastic and healthy. Great to have instead of your normal carb-based sort of little crackers with your cheese, etc. Really healthy stuff. So I hope you enjoyed that, and good luck cooking it. Thank you.